So glad that you're all here to kick off our Food Insecurity Shabbaton. We've already had a wonderful speech by Russell Cohen, and it's my pleasure now to introduce another dear friend of mine, Naomi Maisel. Her passion for food began with a unique blend of California burritos and her bubby's matzo ball soup. During her time studying anthropology and public health at Emory University, she volunteered with urban gardens and food-based nonprofits, conducted research at the CDC on food and health outcomes, and ultimately founded Food Chains, a food recovery group focused on repurposing and donating meals to local shelters. Following graduation, Naomi worked for a social enterprise, helping individuals experiencing homelessness and those with criminal backgrounds secure employment, which further deepened her understanding of systemic inequality. She later moved to Palenzo, Italy. Did I pronounce that right? Sure. To earn a master's in gastronomy from the University of Gastronomic Sciences, where she wrote her thesis on global food systems and immigration and how food is used to build community and identity. Naomi joined La Cocina 5 years ago, initially working on community engagement for their municipal marketplace, the country's first women-led food hall. In 2023, she transitioned to manager of partnerships and impact, where she has been instrumental in formalizing La Cocina's consulting arm, helping organizations worldwide create sustainable and equitable incubator programs. She's about to speak to us in a talk entitled From Struggle to Security, a Jewish Perspective on Food Insecurity and Dignity. And beyond her official bio, I just want to say that Naomi is one of my dearest and best friends whom I had the good fortune to meet in college. And just a brief anecdote that when I was getting ready to graduate and I still wasn't sure what I would be, even though those who know me knew I'd be a rabbi from the start, since I did my own bris when I was 8 days old. But I wasn't sure at college what I would do, and I found Naomi on the quad, and I said, I'm not sure. Everybody seems to know what they're going to do, and I'm not sure yet. And Naomi just listened to me, and she said, what makes you angry? And I thought that that was such an interesting way to think about what you want to do in the world, but it told me so much about how she views this sacred work that she does. What makes her angry for so long has been that people go to bed hungry, that people don't have access to food, which we have in abundance. And she has made it her life's work to address that evil. So I am so glad to introduce you all to my dear friend, Naomi Maisel.
Notes over here. I'm amazing, but I did bring notes as well. Good Shabbos, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I flew out here mostly for the apple turnovers, but also to see y'all tonight. And yeah, I just really appreciate you giving me this space and time on a Friday evening. To see so many faces in this crowd is really, it means a lot. So thank you so much. Thank you for showing up and being here. The thing that makes me angry, as Josh has mentioned, is food insecurity, and it's what we're talking about a little bit today. I also love food so deeply, and I think that's why it makes me so angry. I often find those two emotions are connected, and they're very telling. The things that make us angriest are probably because we have a lot of love in regard to that thing. So this is something I love, and I'm really excited to share with you this evening. I know it's late, and we're a little tired, and we're probably in a food coma, so I'll ask you to bear with me. But just a little bit of show of hands. I would love to know how many of you have ever fasted for Yom Kippur before. Wow, crazy here. And if you don't mind being a little brave, just call out for me. I'm not going to call on people, but how do you feel at the end of a fast before you break it? Well, you're amazing. Feel fine. Awful. Relieve headache. Lightheaded. Angry. Tired. Linda, I think you should get up here and teach us. Okay, we're going to talk because I have questions. Well, thank you so much. For those of you that feel amazing, again, I would love to hear your notes. I need to learn from you. Give up caffeine. I cannot. I'll think about it. Okay, this is generational knowledge we need to share. This is incredible. I asked because, yeah, dehydrated. I think it's really important to remember when we're talking about hunger, it's extremely different than feeling hunger, right? We're in this space, hopefully we're well fed, we're nourished, we're safe here. An extremely different feeling when you're feeling hungry. My partner's the first one to attest, right? I'm not myself when I'm hungry. And it's really easy to think about it in this very academic and level-headed way. But as a reminder, what we'll be speaking about today is very rooted in the body, right? It's very physical. And we're going to talk today about sort of the role that the spiritual plays with that physical realm, but I think it's a really important reminder, especially to kind of get into my story with this topic. So I always thought, when I heard about hunger and people who are hungry, I had a very specific image of it, right? It was typically folks who are somewhat withered away on the street, who my parents would say, if you don't do your homework, that's where you're ending up, which is horrible. And it was a very specific image, and I had a lot of judgment, I think, that went with that image of, this is your fault. And when I went to Emory, where I met Josh, I was shown a documentary early on, right when I started freshman year, called A Place at the Table. Has anyone heard of that documentary? Yeah, I haven't seen it in a minute, but I highly recommend. It's really beautiful, and for me, it was so instrumental in my journey on this topic because it was the first time I had come to hear stories about food insecurity from little kids. It follows two little girls. It follows them to school. It starts at home with breakfast and little brunette in a school uniform, something I can very much relate to, especially younger me. And it talks about their day. And the thing is, they're eating, right? They're eating breakfast. They might have a little lunch, but a huge problem with what they were and weren't eating was the quality of their food, right? The quality of the food they were eating was so nutritionally poor, not very nutrient dense, high in calories. And what was so instrumental for me to hear was them talk about it, right? It's such innocence when you hear kids talk. I feel like it really taps into knowledge we all kind of have buried deep in us, and it's like a remembering. And they talked about feeling, tired and cranky and angry and unable to focus. And this little girl is like, ugh, I'm bad at math. I don't know why I'm bad at math. And it's so heartbreaking, right? Because you are watching it and you're like, you're not bad at math. You're hungry. You're tired. And I like to start with that story because that was the first moment where I realized, oh, this is a really complex issue. And it's also really important because that's your education. You grow up, everything is based on that. I've been lucky enough to have access to incredible education, which has been the foundation of my life's work. And to see little kids be put in that situation and really be set up for failure in so many ways was such an eye-opener for me. So I wanted today kind of share a little bit about my journey, learning about what food insecurity is and what it isn't, debunking some myths, and using my Jewish identity and background to kind of help talk through that, right? And use it as a lens through which to understand some of these really complex topics. So I grew up in San Diego. It's far away. And I, grew up Jewish, went to an Orthodox Jewish school, day school through 8th grade. Food was always a really big part of my life. As Jews, it's so fun to talk to Jews about food because we know it best, come on. It's so integral to who we are. I won the bracha bee in 7th grade, so talking to a professional. And that's kind of how I grew up, like considering food in that realm and, learned a lot about tzedakah. I grew up wanting to help others. I wanted to go into medicine. And when I went to Emory, I did just that, right? I enrolled in pre-med as a faithful Jewish daughter of a doctor does, and pretty quickly was put in this direction of food security via a path of public health. And that's where I learned about the concept of food security as I wanted to speak about today. So there's hunger, as we know, which is absolutely a realm of food security, but there's actually a definition. Has anyone here, just raise of hands, prior to this weekend, had you heard of food security? Is it a topic you're somewhat familiar with? See some nods. Oh, nice, very nice. It's actually a term coined by the FAO, and it has pillars associated with it. So if you look on your tables, if you like those, I made them, and if you don't like them, Josh made them. But they speak to the different pillars of food security, which are affordability, so the literal affordability of a food item, access, so typically referring to the physical access of food, can also move into the realm of affordability based on what you're able to access. Utilization, so great, I have this chicken, but I have no idea what to do with it. It's the knowledge and also the ability to use the chicken, use the food. Do I have a kitchen? Do I have utensils? Do I have access to electricity? And then stability, which rounds all of those together. Do I have all of those consistently? A lot of people don't realize, and I can understand why, that somebody who might be really well fed tonight might not know where their next meal is going to come from. That is not stable, and that's not food secure, right? So when we talk about food security, it's not a short-term situation. It speaks to your entire life experience. And that's really important because there's a huge mental health component to food security as well, right? Again, I'm eating well now, but if I don't know from where and when and how my next meal will come, the rational choice might be for me to overeat tonight. That's actually the correct choice, right? If you don't know where it's coming from. And so how we start to think about this can really help us understand why people do what they do and can maybe help garner some compassion for what we deem as rational when we're fed and healthy and safe, and what you might deem so if you're not in that situation. The menu tonight, our very, very good sports chef helped us create this, and I can get into a little bit more in depth, but on your tables, they kind of speak to some of the things we had. We had this kind of market salad, which is fresh and from the farmer's market, and it speaks to, again, physically what is available to you, which has a lot to do with seasonality as well as shipping and economy, which we will get into. We had the Three Sisters stew. Who knows what Three Sisters is? Have y'all heard of that? It's a very cool agricultural concept, but it's been passed down to generations, and it's this idea of when you grow these three crops together, they support each other. So it's a really beautiful symbol of the symbiosis, as well as generational knowledge needed to create these resilient communities. And we also had the chicken, which really speaks to utilization. I have been a vegetarian for 15 years, so I don't have utilization for chicken. I don't know how to cook it, but really speaking to, you need skill set, you need equipment to make that work. So somewhat of a stretch in some areas, but a fun way for us to connect it to the topic tonight. I like to bring up food security's pillars because it speaks to the fact that it is upholding a system, right? When you have pillars of something, it's a reminder that there's a structure taking place. And, I'm sure many of you have heard this fact before, but there's enough food grown in this world to feed everyone. That has been proven time and again. 40% of the food in this country gets wasted. So it is a structural issue, right? And that gets wasted in this regard, gets wasted distribution at grocery stores. Talk to me after. We can talk about it for hours. It's my favorite thing to talk about. But we have enough, right? And that's really important understanding then why is this an issue, right? It's really frustrating actually to think about, it doesn't have to be an issue. So what's going on here? As Josh mentioned, when I was in college, I came up against this. I was volunteering, again, Tzedakah, wanted to bring that to college. I joined Volunteer Emory, and I led a group of students every week to go visit a food pantry. And it was really beautiful. We got to work in the kitchen, put together bags for folks and pass them out. And I would literally leave that trip, come back to campus, and immediately go eat in our cafeteria for lunch. I don't know how any of y'all have ever seen in the cafeteria, the way hours worked, you would put your plate on the conveyor belt when you were done to go back in the kitchen. And oh my God, Josh can attest to it, but sorry, Rabbi Jacobs, the piles of food. It's so painful. There was so much waste. And I just come from the space of people not having enough to this space of such abundance that we're wasting it. And that was a really big trigger for me in realizing something is broken, right? It's not an issue if we don't have enough food, because that would be a different solution, but something's broken here. So I started Campus Kitchens, now called Food Chains, which is a very cool food recovery org that's still going. I'm very proud. And they get the food that the university prepared to serve but never served. Not stuff you would get. It's not unsanitary. But, plates of bread and chicken and vegetables, and we would repurpose them into beautiful meals and then donate them to shelters. And for me, that was this really important moment of realizing, there's a way for us to address this, but it has to be working within what we already have. Another thing that I love about the fact that it's a system is that it's not a personal failing, right? When you are part of a broken system, it doesn't mean you are a broken person. This system is broken. And that's sad. We can sit in that sadness for a moment. That's really sad, and it's hard to sit with sometimes. And I think it's also really beautiful because it means we can do something about it. There's so many things in life that we can't control. And the beautiful thing about a system is that, again, we can control it because we're a part of it. It can happen to anyone. And, with Pierre Cayavot, we talk about, oh my gosh, my Hebrew is really rusty, so apologies. But Dan lechof zechut, judge your neighbor favorably. It's a huge part of this work. And for me, in addition to kind of realizing that food security is a system, my next realization had to be that means the people experiencing it were victims of that system, right? And as I mentioned, I don't know who else had this experience growing up, but my parents, when we'd be on the street and see someone who was likely homeless or struggling, would say again, like, that's what happens when you don't go to school or if you're on drugs. And of course, that's a reality. Yeah, everyone says it, right? I get it. But that's just such a small percentage of what we're talking about here. And I think people really need to realize that. Russell had actually mentioned this briefly in his speech earlier tonight, but I was shocked to know that one of the highest populations of folks who are food insecure in this country are veterans is high. It's not it though. College students. I always perceive college students as having it all together. They're working towards something. They're smart. They're dedicated. They're not lazy. They're not bad. They're not mess ups, which are all these terms that we inherently tell ourselves stories about these people we're seeing on the street. So, the second step for me and path for me was redefining who this is, right? Redefining the face of food security. I, as Josh mentioned, after college, worked at a really cool nonprofit called First Step Staffing. And it was a staffing company for folks who were experiencing homelessness or were leaving the carceral system. And a lot of folks are struggling with mental illness. And a lot of folks, when I took the time to get to know them, had come from backgrounds very similar to my own. There's one guy in particular who I remember regularly. He was really well-spoken, which is not the case for everyone I worked with. And him and I got to chatting one day, and I learned that he was a professor at the local university, and he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is a tragedy, and it's something we cannot control. And he was fired because of that, which is horrendous, and then had a really hard time getting and maintaining access to his medication because he was fired. He lost his home. He lost his transit, so it was hard to get another job, even though he's had these qualifications. You can see where it comes from. So by the time I meet him, he's on the street. He's addicted to other things that he's taking to try to, succeed in this life. And he's coming to my office to try to get a job in arguably some of the worst jobs. That's why I left ultimately. It wasn't even a fun place to work, right? And he was trying so hard. And I think of him all the time because that's someone who arguably has all of the things, right? But something horrible happened to him. And because we have this broken system and we don't have safety nets, we're not built to support each other, we failed him. And it was really sad. And that is really sad. But it's also positive because, again, it means there's something we can do about it. The Torah teaches us about Shemitah, which is on the 7th year, right? We let the land sit and we let it do its thing to rest. You can't plant, you can't harvest, you can't do other agricultural work. And one of my favorite connections of that to this work is it's a reminder that human ownership is a construct too, right? We are all from this land and it's all our land, right? This God's land. And there's God in all of us. And I love this teaching because, we are busy people. We got to get things done. I work full time. And that's really important. And this teaching is a reminder that even then, you have your farm and you have production, you need to take the time to remember that you come from somewhere, that everyone else is coming from the same place, right? And it's not belonging to any of us solely. It is really beautiful that when we can see each other that way, we're remembering this communal responsibility, right? So it's not just food insecurity means you're bad. It's the system that's bad. And then more so, it's our responsibility, right? It's not just, oh, that person's struggling and that's really sad. It's if he's struggling, I'm struggling, right? If you really want to meditate on that, we are all from the same land. It is all our land. And so if my neighbor is struggling, I should consider myself struggling too. And I love that this teaching reminds us of that responsibility. And it's not to say that there's no ownership. The work that I do at La Cocina. So La Cocina is a nonprofit based in San Francisco, California. And we are an incubator program, if y'all are familiar with that. It supports small businesses, kind of reach formalization. And we work specifically with low-income women who are usually women of color, immigrant women, who want to formalize their food businesses. So we're working in capitalism, baby. But it's compassionate capitalism. We're trying to redefine and rename what that means. And we're trying to put people in leadership positions who remember that they're from the community. And so when they're hiring and when they're doing events and when they're creating their menus and building public spaces, they're doing so with the community in mind. Versus, someone who owns 10 franchises and lives 10 states away, right? And so it's not to say that you can't have ownership. It's not to say you can't fight for things and we should just all be depressed and sad and not work for anything, but it's work for things with the remembrance that you are not doing any of this alone and you're connected. And I love the work that I do because I'm really redefining what our economic structure looks like in San Francisco with amazing food. And the Torah also talks about peah and parrot, which are, leaving the corners of your fields for the poor and hungry. Leket as well, the same with grapes and olives during ripening. When you've forgotten them, they fall, you let them be. There's a beauty in this idea of I can't have everything, right? And I think with this, I prefer to see this teaching not as, whatever falls someone else gets, give them the leftovers, right? This teaching is speaking to the fact you don't need all of it, right? When we're greedy and we take more than we need because we have a scarcity mindset, which is understandable, it makes so that there's not enough for others, right? Again, we have enough for everybody. And it just calls back to the fact that because we have systems in place, corporations, organizations, locally, community members, who knows, that are taking more than their share, it means there's not enough for everyone. So it's a reminder as well, right? Have your land and make sure there's enough for everyone. Shechika says, when you reap the harvest in the field and forget a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, orphan, and the widow. I believe Russell also mentioned this. The stranger, the orphan, and the widow. I like to include this one as well. It might seem redundant, but I appreciate how the Torah is mentioning that we're focusing on the most vulnerable, right? And that looks different in every community. In my community, we're working with low-income women who are working in the informal restaurant industry and want to turn these into businesses. But it's going to look different in your communities. In Cleveland, in your own family systems, in Ohio, in the Midwest, where have you. Every single community is going to have those that are the most vulnerable. And what I love about this Torah portion is it reminds us we have to focus on that population. I'm coming from Berkeley. It's a different population than it is here. And that's so special because we each get to focus in on the work we can do in our communities. Y'all are going to be the best leaders to make change here, right? I don't know that. I'm not of this community. And it's so special that I get to make change in my community. And the belief is that if everyone focuses in on their communities and makes these changes locally, it will make everything better for the entire world, right? Think globally, act locally. We've all heard it. Another thing that I like about Shemitah and what it teaches us, in addition to specifying that the land should be left alone every 7th year, it also specifies that we must allow those who will be benefiting to pick the food up themselves. Picking up themselves. We could just pick it up for them and put it in baskets, right? But it specifically specifies, pick it up themselves. And you might, initially upon reading that, you might think, well, it's kind of rude, right? I should pick it up for them. But it's very intentional, right? Tzedakah obviously translates to righteous giving. It's not just giving. We need to prioritize giving in ways that promote dignity, right? And promote self-sufficiency where possible. And what I love about this teaching is it speaks to the ideal form of this kind of anonymous charity of making sure that folks can preserve their dignity, preserve their humanity, even in this time of need. When I was doing the work with the nonprofit I created, the food recovery nonprofit in college, I was 18 and just very excited to change the world. And we brought the food to our first shelter. And I was like, here you go. We did it. You're welcome. And they were like, oh, no, thank you. We don't want that. And I was like, what do you mean? This is a food pantry. Of course you want this. And they were like, no, we actually get bread every Monday from this local amazing bakery, so we don't want your bread pudding, but thank you so much. And I felt, admittedly, I was like, what the heck? I was doing the right thing. And I had to humble myself a little because I realized that I was coming from this background, which I've been taught my whole life. especially because I'm one of 5. My parents said this often, beggars can't be choosers, right? We've all heard that trope, beggars can't be choosers. It's a really common concept. And I feel like what Shmita tells us is like, beggars certainly can be choosers. Why can't they be choosers, right? Why is it that in my time of need, my humanity goes away? My preference goes away. I don't obviously like the concept of beggars. I don't use that terminology, but right, just to explain, like when you are in need, it doesn't mean your humanity falters. It doesn't mean that your preference falters. Why do we have a kosher food bank here in Cleveland? This is not a rhetorical question. Please answer. Right. We have food insecurity among our Jewish population. If we followed the tenet of beggars can't be choosers, there would not be a kosher food bank. You don't need kosher. You're hungry, eat the food. Right? We all know how painful that is to receive. And for any that have received that directly, I'm sorry. It's so painful, right? You're being denied your sense of self. You're being denied your identity. And I know I take food so seriously because it is identity and it is self. What is this life without dreams? What is this life without preference, without personality? There's a concept in food security work that often gets intertwined called food sovereignty. Is anyone familiar with that concept? Sovereignty, food sovereignty. It comes from, thank you for repeating that, the emphasis on the word sovereign, right? The ruling over. It comes from the concept of being able to choose, to rule over yourself. In modern times, food sovereignty is used to describe the concept of you typically eating culturally relevant food. That's the definition you'll see in most places. So, I work in the Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco, which has a very high rate of unemployment and hosts the Tenderloin neighborhood of San Francisco. It is a neighborhood that I work in. That's what it's called. And I don't know why it's called that. I couldn't tell you, some reason. But it is known, most importantly, for having a really high rate of unemployment and high rates of addiction. And it also has the most diverse community in all of San Francisco and the highest per capita rate of children to any neighborhood in San Francisco. So it gets a really bad rep. It's a really beautiful place, and we're working to make it better and working to empower it to become its full self. A lot of the folks in that neighborhood live in SROs, which stands for single resident occupancy locations. What you mostly need to know from that is they are really cheap and often don't have full kitchens. It's actually illegal for them to have full kitchens. So it's very challenging for the folks living in them to cook their own food. It's actually quite nearly impossible. COVID made that 10 times harder. And we provide food for those communities. And it was so fascinating having that experience because I felt like I was right back in college. I thought I had learned my lesson, but I got that same feedback. I don't want this food. And it was really hard to receive. And again, I had to sit with, these are folks coming from all over the world. We had a lot of folks who are immigrants who had only been used to one type of food. And in their time of need, were not really excited to try something new, right? They really wanted comfort. We all have that comfort food, right? It's literally a concept, comfort food. Food that reminds us of home, makes us feel safe. I'm very adventurous with food, and I recommend everyone get out there and try new things. And I still take my comfort foods very seriously. They're important in times of need, important in times of transition, in times of homesickness. And that is dignity, right? That's tzedakah. Giving them the food that they're used to and excited about, that makes them feel safe and seen, is a huge part of this. And food sovereignty is a huge part of this work. I bring this up because it can get kind of contentious. There's a lot of myth out there and a lot of debate about this concept of welfare, right? There's a lot of myth about welfare queens and why should I support someone who's just gonna spend their food in this way? And there's a lot of politics behind that, but I think what matters most is taking a minute and taking a beat to consider, do I know what's best for somebody else? How do I know that, right? I don't know if I trust someone who's not Jewish to choose my kosher meal. Probably not. And it's really important to remind ourselves of that when we're judging, right? Like what is making up, what's coming behind these choices? And what would I look like there, right? What should help look like? Kashrut is obviously extremely crucial to Jewish identity. I have a master's in gastronomy, which sounds a lot fancier than it is. I just drank wine in Europe for a year. But My master's program was called World Food Cultures and Mobility. It was very cool. And I had an entire course on my syllabus about Jewish food identity. I was the only Jew for miles, so this was very exciting. In this tiny little town in Palenzo, northern Italy, literally population me. Like it was crazy. And I was so excited and so honored, and all of you should be too. We are so prolific in food. We have such a strong identity associated with food that this tiny university in Italy had us on the syllabus. And we explored a lot of really, really beautiful concepts behind Jewish food, which I grew up with and then got to see from an academic lens for the first time, which was really special. And there's a million theories and philosophies behind kosher and kashrut. And from a more like Goy academic perspective, one of my favorites is the importance of it to prioritizing the communal, right? Because of kosher, we eat together, we live together, we live nearby, we share grocery stores, we share butchers. It really, because food is necessary multiple times a day and connects all of us, it's a need we all share and every single human being on this earth has in common. You can't say you have nothing in common with other people. That is something you always will have in common. It requires us to be in community. And it is such a beautiful connection, and it's so important to our identity. And I was I was doing my master's thesis from this program, working with asylum seekers, and I had such a beautiful experience interviewing folks and talking about how, as they were migrating and moving to different parts of the world, like how food played into that. And you could just tell how much comfort people's faces who were so downtrodden prior, so tired, lit up when they talked about food. If someone's sad in your life, ask them about their comfort food. Like, ask them about the food they grew up with, and you'll see it lights up their soul because it is such an important part of who we are. And as I've moved through my journey with food security, I've really come full circle to not just caring because it's a public health issue and I want to save the world, but because I'm really convinced that it's what ties us to our humanity in a deep, deep way. So now what? It's so depressing. The good news is, because of everything I'm saying, it's a community. We, of all people, are so tied to it. It's actually a lot we can do. And direct action is really important. Direct action is huge. Volunteering at your local food bank is huge. Talking to people on the street, buying groceries for folks and delivering them. I was speaking to someone in the room earlier who used to do that. That's huge. And what we're really excited about focusing this weekend on is that, again, this system, right, these pillars. Because while direct action is important, it's equally important to parallel it with work on fixing the system. Has anyone here, maybe it's just me, I hope not, had a smoothie for breakfast or something healthy, and then later been like, well, I can have a brownie because I was so good today? Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, come on, liars. It's a psychology term called moral licensing. It's very normal, don't worry. Ask the doctor. And it's this idea that I did a good thing and so I'm done. And it's because we have very limited willpower. We're tired. It's very understandable. But it's so important that we don't think about food security or other challenges plaguing our communities as checkboxes, because I guarantee you will do one amazing thing, good job, and then you will stop. So what I encourage everyone to do leaving this space is don't just think about, oh, how can I volunteer next week or what can I donate to, which do think about that, but also consider, in the big scheme of things, what's my role in this system, right? This is my land. It's the 7th year. I'm letting it sit. What am I going to do with my year? And I want you to be selfish, I want you to feel that this work is about you. I was saying to Josh earlier, I walk by a lake every morning for the most part, and I saw a trash bag in there last week. And I was like, oh, that's so sad. And then I was walking my dog, and I looked at him, and I was like, I'm so sorry. Because it's not just so sad. It's a personal failing, right? If that was my drinking water, I wouldn't go, that's so sad. I would jump in and get that out. Get out of there. That's my drinking water. We all need to consider this our drinking water, right? It literally is our drinking water. Don't get me started on that. But, we all need to consider this ours. And when you do, you will feel angry, and then you will take action. And that's actually such a beautiful gift. I'll leave you with a couple things. One of my favorite quotes is this Aboriginal artist and activist from Australia. And she writes, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. It's beautiful, right? It really hits. And it's saying, don't pity me. You know, tzedakah is beautiful, but I don't see tzedakah as charity. Like I give this to you and I go off and do my own thing. It's a connection. There's dignity, there's righteousness to it. And so if I can leave y'all with anything today, it's just to feel excited that you are a part of this. This is your work. And there's something every single person in this room has a role to play, and you can play it in so many ways. You don't need to be overwhelmed. You don't need to go work for the city. I don't recommend it. I've done it. It's not great. But in whatever way you can contribute to this system, from whatever perspective you have absolutely the power to do so. And because, again, our food systems are so connected to our land and our bodies and the natural world and our economies, any single endpoint in which you address the situation will make it better for everyone. So that's all she got. Thank you guys so much. I hope that was helpful. Thank you. That's been my journey with food security. I wonder if we're going to do some Q&A now, but I'll.
That's what I was going to say. So I just want to thank Naomi Maisel one more time. Thank you so much for an incredible speech. We are going to open the floor to Q&A. I already see some hands up. I'll run around, and I think we may just have one, so I'll run back and forth. Once the question's asked, I'll bring the mic back. And Naomi has agreed to answer all of your questions in an Australian accent, so this is very exciting.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. A whole new perspective about food security, something which we really never talk about. But when you started about you were angry, and that's what got you going. Well, I am angry, and I'm angry at the food banks. Helene is here, Joel is here. Maybe they will listen to this. We are so busy emphasizing we don't want your expired food. Don't give it to us. And I sat with someone and we sorted out all the food that was expired. And it really bugged me. This was in 1990. We went to Spain, and when we used to travel, we would go into the supermarkets and buy our own food and make our own meals. And I noticed the tuna fish and this was in a big supermarket in Madrid. This isn't this place. The tuna fish and the asparagus cans, because those were easy to eat, had an expiration date 10 years from that date. We come back to the United States, and they started articles about expiration dates, sell-by dates, and whatnot. And this has really been proliferating in the newspapers and in the on television, everywhere, about stop with these dates. They're not always accurate. They're starting again with the eggs. Expiration date, you still have days after it. Okay, I can't, you have to read the articles. Maybe you need to put the articles out in front of the people when you give them the food so they understand what the dates really mean. That's one thing. And the point made is that a lot of this food is good afterwards. For example, I saw the woman from Barilla, the sales lady, in Mark's, taking off the shelf everything that was sell-by date. Everybody agrees the pasta is good for at least 3 years after that.
Do you mind if I?
What?
Leave? Huh? Yeah, I'll let her respond.
No, I just want. I mean, it really gets me angry. Yeah, that we're throwing away food because I can eat it, but nobody else can eat it. I mean, and that is exactly the attitude that's presented. If you don't want to give it to them, at least if you give it to them, have a shelf on the side.
I would say that your time has expired, but you'll tell me that's just a construct. That it's not. Okay, you do have privileges. You do have privileges.
Have a shelf on the side where all this so-called expired food is.
Thank you.
And leave it up to the people if they want to choose it or not.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for bringing that up. It's such a big part of this equation. And I really appreciate your anger because, again, anger means you care. If you weren't angry, that means you don't care. So thank you. Food waste really bothers me too. It's how I got started in this work. I mean, I told you the story, so I really feel you. And as I mentioned, 40% of all the food that we provide in this country goes to waste. So it is a huge issue. I might need to tell you that you might need to be mad with somebody else. And it's really, and I would love to, there's food banks here, and I can't wait to talk to them more tomorrow. We're going to be on a panel together, so maybe we can have this discussion as well. But what's really challenging is the ways that the policies in the government uphold, to your point, a lot of the brokenness here, right? So legally, and I'm in the restaurant business, so I know way too much about all of these fun permits. It's impossible. It's really impossible to run a small business. A lot of it is because legally, we cannot sell expired Barilla. I personally eat Barilla 10 years after the due date. You should talk to my partner. He hates it. I think it's stupid. I eat them all the time. But legally, from a legal perspective, they can't sell it, and the food banks can't give it out, right? And it's understandable on paper, right? If I'm writing policy, I'm in the government, I'm assuming, I'm gonna say, don't sell expired food, because I'm talking eggs and meat. But obviously, somewhere down the line, that policy missed a step, and there's probably room to reconsider some complexity there. And so I'm like, take that anger, let's go to City Hall. Let's talk to USDA. I think that anger is really, really important, and it's especially productive when we can pinpoint where it comes from. I don't want to speak for the food banks here. The food bank that I work with back home also feels your frustration, and their hands are tied. And so we are working together to try to push legislation around that. Sure, and that's important, and. So thank you for bringing that up. Sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for, that's really important.
So related to Sheila's question, and Sheila, I want you to know some of the eggs you're going to have at my house have already expired, but we're eating them anyway. What percentage of the food waste is due to these random sell by, use by, which I don't pay attention to either?
That's a great question. Thanks.
Yep. It's the only exercise I ever get. It's great.
Yeah. This is how we work out the rabbi. The question asked was what percentage of this waste, comes from where? It comes from these laws. Again, my partner's a farmer. All we do is talk. You can imagine this is all we talk about at home. It's a pretty boring household. And a huge percentage of that percentage is actually from distribution. It's really frustrating. There's some really cool companies coming up that are trying to address this issue, some very cool bottlenecks, but a lot of it comes from the fact, and again, this gets into policy, but also gets into economics, which are obviously related. A lot of grocery stores will not purchase produce from farmers that they don't think they can sell, right? You've probably heard of ugly produce or imperfect produce. A lot of that goes to waste because grocery stores won't buy it because, and I'm not trying to point fingers, but you won't buy it, right? That's what I'm saying. It is their fault and is also for us to approach, right? I purposely buy the ugly stuff. It's my way to stick it to the man. And I'm not buying stuff that's moldy, right? There's balance. There's always balance to be had and nuance. But yeah, a lot of it comes from distribution. Another really frustrating place it comes from is once the food is purchased from farmers, it gets shuttled along to grocery stores. And it's really expensive to shuttle think about a tender bruising fruit or vegetable. You're not as careful with, it's too expensive to be careful. We all know that from our personal lives, I'm sure. It's too expensive to take care, and that's unfortunate. That's a big problem in our food system and in a lot of systems. And so a lot of that food, I think about 15-20% of the most recent numbers, goes to waste in transit. It's getting bumped around, it's getting hit in shelves, it's not getting stored properly, and it goes to waste before it even hits the shelves. The grocery stores charge us the premium to make up for that loss. So that's another area in which it affects food security, right? They are being really careless, and we are paying for it. So that's a huge portion. The portion of food that gets wasted by you, throwing away your plate and not finishing it, is the smallest percentage. And so be mindful. And also, I like to blame the corporations and not the individuals. We're all doing our best, right? That scale is so big that you not finishing the eggs at your house, again, work on it. We all can work on it, but it's typically a much bigger scale that's pushing those numbers. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Sorry, I talk a lot. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anybody has a question?
Yeah, right here. Go quicker.
I'm not sure quite how to ask this, but I've heard discussion about, in relation to the concept feeding the hungry, that there are, even within Judaism, there it's good to feed non-Jews, but you have to make sure you have a level of obligation to feed Jews first. I'm sure you're familiar with that, maybe from your upbringing, and you know, I think we need to take care of our own people. I also think if we have an obligation to take care of people who aren't Jewish. And so I wonder, and I guess I do have some anger about that. So I would just wonder what comments you would have about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to any of that as well. Sure. No pressure. Well, Larry, thank you. That's such a thoughtful question. Thank you, Larry. And I hear you. It's like hard to ask because like I think you bring up a really beautiful tension. Like that's a tension, right? The Torah tells us in so many places to treat everyone like our neighbor. There's so much compassion. There's so many moments in which we're encouraged to treat everyone with love and kindness and respect and generosity. And then you read that and you're like, wait, but you just said. I think there's a lot of moments like that in the Torah. If Rabbi Jacobs is open to it, I would also love his commentary because he knows it much better than I. My initial reaction to that is also anger. That's hard. I don't like that. And I guess the way I see it, maybe one way that you could interpret that is do what you can first. You know, do what's available to you first. If you're surrounded by Jews, act locally. Something that I get asked, so I run our consulting arm. I swear this is going to relate. I run the consulting arm at my work. So I work with people. Someone in Ohio reached out recently, might be back, who want to create the same thing we do here, nonprofit kitchens. And I always get asked, can you just come and do it here, right? Just open one in Atlanta, open one in Cleveland, open one in New Zealand, what have you. And we don't do that because we have a really strong belief that you will best serve the communities you're a part of because you know those communities and you live in those communities. And if you live where you work, you will serve the community better because, again, be selfish. Like, we're self-serving in a beautiful way. It doesn't have to be bad, right? We're here for our survival, the survival of our children, our families. And so I guess I would like to choose to interpret that as work within your community, whatever that means. For you, it might be the Jewish community. For me, it might be the Latinx community in the Mission District where I work in San Francisco, but working within the communities that you're most a part of first, focusing there. I think that's also just going to be where you have the most impact. But I would love your thoughts. And I really appreciate the question. It's a really great point.
And it's a beautiful answer. It doesn't really need my elaboration. And then I'll get to Joel Fox, who I was going to introduce. We're honored to have you here. But just by way of brief addition, Maimonides talks about concentric circles, right? And that's what you're talking about, Larry, that you look out for your household first. And then from there, your Jewish community, which is an extension of your family, right? And then from there, you can move out into concentric circles until you arrive at this beautiful teaching that Naomi is giving us about we're all a human family, right? And we should look at it all of each other like we are one family. But there's a reality and a triage, right? So Maimonides is saying you start in the core and then you move out in concentric circles. In the Shulchan Aruch, our legal code, it says that if somebody's hungry, you feed them, and you don't investigate them to ascertain if they're deceiving you or not. Right? And I used to think my walking down the streets of New York, my dad would always say, I'd always see him give money to everybody. And I said, how do you keep this up, first of all? But also, is there any danger to this? And he would say, if if I give to 10 people and 9 of them didn't truly need it, or maybe are going to spend it in a way that I might not approve in an ideal situation, but one truly needed it and buys some food because they're hungry, then that's worth it. Right? So I love that the Shulchan Aruch sort of affirms that story from my dad, that when somebody's hungry, you give and you don't investigate. And I might apply that to our situation to say that you don't investigate as to, are you Jewish? Are you not Jewish? Right? That is irrelevant. If somebody's hungry, you feed them and you don't investigate. I'm going to use this as a segue to get to Joel and just to plug before I hand it over to you that we're so grateful that you've joined us this Shabbos. We hope you continue and join us tomorrow. We're going to hear our sermon from Liz Lilienfeld-Braun, who, like Russell, works at Mazon, the Jewish Response to Hunger. Following services, we'll have a congregational lunch, followed by a very special panel with a number of incredible people from within our community and who are joining us as special guests. We'll have Helene Loeb, a volunteer for a very long time at the Kosher Food Bank. We'll have Joel Fox, who is a very dedicated long-term volunteer at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. And this will get to the sort of serving our community, serving the broader community. We'll have Naomi again, of course. We'll have Russell again. And we'll have Liz on that panel as well. So I'd like to throw it over to Joel and again invite you all to keep coming back for our Shabbaton and to not miss the panel.
Run.
So, Helene, I'm going to apologize to you. Helene Loeb is a board member of the Kosher Food Bank. I'm active on the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, and the Greater Cleveland Food Bank has 1,000 distributors of food, all the shelters, all the senior centers, all the schools, libraries, camps, etc. So many places that feed the hungry with food bank food. One of our oldest and one of our top 5 biggest distributors of those 1,000 distributors of food in Northeast Ohio from the Greater Cleveland Food Bank is the Kosher Food Pantry, where Helene is involved. Now, the Jewish community in the area that this food bank serves is about 5% of the population. So for 5% of the population, for our food pantry, the Kosher Food Pantry, to be one of the 5 biggest of 1,000 distributors of food to the hungry, Larry, should suggest to you, I hope, that we're doing a beautiful job as a Jewish community of feeding our own very deeply, most of the people we reach who need our help, and half of the food, Helene, correct me if I'm wrong, half of the food that the Kosher Food Pantry distributes goes to non-Jews. So we are taking care of our own, and we are taking care of the general community. And at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, the first name you see when you walk into our main distribution hub that distributes food to those 1,000 places is the Wooliger Conference Room over on the left, and the Sandy and Sheila Conference Volunteer Lounge over on the right, and the Maisel Pessis Conference Rooms right at the top of the stairs. The Jewish community is very generous in this work in Northeast Ohio. The food bank reaches 85% of the people who the IRS tells us qualify based on income for our work. A good food bank reaches 50% of the people who need their help. And we're at 85%. So Larry, please, we're very proud to be in that position. We take care of our own, we take care of the general community, and you all help us, and you should be very proud of those facts.
Thank you.
I want to say a big Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and consider this your amuse bouche, your appetizer for not that this was appetizer, but that this is the beginning. This is to start what we hope will be a very satisfying and fulfilling course throughout this Shabbaton. Go ahead.
And I forgot to mention earlier, I did bring some flyers and recipe cards about, mostly just recipes because they're fun, from my organization. So if you want to, I didn't speak about it much, but if you're curious and want to learn more, you can come check them out. Or I also brought my business card, so if you want to yell at me over email, feel free. Not on Shabbos, obviously, but anytime. Feel free to take one, and I'm always around for questions.
And there are flyers for the Kosher Food Bank as well.
Yeah.
Shabbat
Sorry.
Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.